Awesome. Um, so there are three reasons why we use research in the first place. The first is ethos, which Mira talked about a little bit yesterday. So it's how the audience knows to trust you, and your ethos comes across from the kinds of sources you use. If you're citing Wikipedia, your ethos is obviously going to be a lot lower than if you're citing a Harvard professor. So we'll also talk to you about what kinds of sources you can use, how you can find these sources, etc. The second thing is your pathos, which is tied more to your emotions and feelings. This doesn't necessarily involve research, but the way you present your facts and the kinds of facts that you use can impact this. For example, if you're saying this could lead to global extinction, that's obviously something that's going to lead to a lot of emotional response versus, yeah, we might kill one person. Um, so it's the way in which the kinds of facts that you present. And then your logos is your logic and reasoning. So how logical of an argument do you create, and do you show them every single step of the way uh, to get from point A to point Z for why your argument makes sense, and do you have evidence to back up every single step uh, that you have in your argument chain? So what is evidence? Evidence is basically anything that you use to support your claim. This includes articles, research papers, press releases, books, etc. And these lend accuracy and reliance to your claim. So think of like the quotes you use in an essay. Those are examples of evidence. But the way we format our evidence is a little different. So typically in debate, you're going to see most of your evidence is going to come from newspaper articles, then from research papers, especially in stuff like international relations theory, and then also press releases and books. So you need evidence in order to win your rounds. You need to explain why something that you say is true using what we call warrants, or basically specific pieces of evidence that explain why your claim is true. So this establishes both your ethos and your logos. And in the round, we call it a card. And you'll see, I'll actually show you an example of what a card is right now. And I'll break this down, but this is how we showcase our evidence. And the reason why it's called a card is because back in the Stone Ages, before they used computers in debate, they actually took photocopies of everything, put them on note cards, and would physically cut out and highlight different parts of the evidence in order to create the evidence that they wanted to read in round. So now for finding your articles. So Google is great, but there are a few things you need to know when you're using Google. First, don't put full sentences in your search bar. This will often limit your the kinds of sources you see, and also it'll give you some really weird search results, and you'll most likely be linked to blogs, because the blogs are the ones that have those full sentences that you're talking about. Be careful about where you look for evidence. People are less likely to believe like Wikipedia than they are to believe like CNN. So make sure you know where your evidence is coming from and that it's from a reputable source, because you don't want to be called out in the middle of a round with someone says your evidence is from like a high schooler who is posting their blog, while ours is from like some professor at some university. If you haven't met Google Scholar, this is a great site. It's literally just scholar.google.com. And when you search in here, it will give you different articles written by academics. So you know that anything that you pull from this site will be golden evidence. So we really encourage that you use this if possible. In your search bar itself, use double quotes to find articles that contain that exact phrase. So if you need an article that says global warming and pandas in the same article, you would put global warming in one set of quotes and pandas in another set of quotes. And evidence must include warrants for your cards. Again, these are the reasons why your claim is true. You can't just cut an article that says global warming is going to kill us all. You need to have specific reasons why. So maybe it's because an increase in CO2 level means ocean acidification, things like that. I also want to introduce you to the Google Advanced Search. So if you go just to Google, say you look something up like global warming, you go to settings, And then this option here is advanced search. And you can say you want all of these words, this exact phrase, any of these words, none of these words. Do you want specific stats, the numbers? So this is a really great resource to narrow your search results and making sure you get exactly what you want out of your search. Are there any questions about how to find articles? No? Okay. So then let's go into your accuracy. Um, so it's when you're having your evidence, you want to use the most unbiased sources that you can. So the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, The Economist, CBS, ABC, NPR, Reuters are all great examples of these. Some not so great examples would be blog posts that you see. Obviously, biased sources in debate. A lot of the time now you're looking at like Fox News isn't being cited as much because it's not the most reliable source. Yeah. This chart here kind of shows you how much bias different uh, different web sources are. So if you look at this, it's basically saying you don't want to cite something like patriotics because they're going to be way too liberal. They're going to only be talking the liberal point of view. So you're not going to get anything even remotely conservative or considering the conservative approach. Similarly, on the other side, if you use InfoWars, you're going to get just a bunch of conservative garbage, and you don't want to just listen to conspiracy theories, which is why we recommend you use something in the mainstream, because like Reuters, NPR, etc., are really going to not put any bias into their articles, and so that means the articles that you're getting out of there are going to have better evidence quality, more warrants, things like that, and there's no obvious skew to it. So cards. Cards are notes that you make for your case. It's made when you select certain sentences and words from your entire piece of evidence, and you only read the selected sentences or phrases. So these are the things that you highlight. And it quotes the most important warrants in your cards because obviously everything that someone writes is going to be very important, but you don't have time to read in a debate round an entire like 3-page article when you really only need to say like these 2 lines that you got from this article. So this card is broken down into several different sections that I'll kind of go into now. So we underline our warrants, so reasons why your claim is true. So if you look back at this example here, we have a bunch of things underlined. Like I can't highlight it, but you can see the different underlinings. And these are going to be reasons why warming drives down crop production. And so, and then from those things that you have underlined, only some of them are highlighted, and these are the words that you're actually going to say when you're reading your case. The reason why you don't highlight everything that's underlined is because a lot of it is redundant, and you want to be as efficient as possible to get as many points across as possible in the short amount of time because you are constrained by speech time in debate. So here. Now, there's specific terminology that we use when we're cutting a card. So this first line up here, your tag is basically just your claim. What are you trying to say with this piece of evidence? The next part is going to be your citation. There's 2 parts to a cite. First is the author's last name and the year it was published, and then the rest of like a normal MLA citing. So where it came from, who wrote it, why is the person who wrote it qualified, the source you got it from, and the date it was published, and sometimes the date it was accessed. So these are all examples. Now I was going to use this as a card step by step, but I'll show you how I actually cut a card. So I started just with a generic search term, Trump loses in 2020. Now I want to get results only from within the last week because those are going to be the most up to date. So I went to tools, and when you click on tools, it lets you select the time that you wanted it. And so I just wanted the past week. And let's take this New York Times opinion article. It was written just 2 days ago, and I will copy and paste this entire thing in. Copy it and paste it into a Google Doc. If Zoom will let me switch. There we go. Actually, paste without formatting. So to paste without formatting, I use Control-Shift-V, and that's just easier for me to go through. Now when I'm going through this, my first thought is, okay, what was I trying to prove? I was trying to say Trump will lose the 2020 election. Trump will lose 2020 election, and this is going to be kind of my work in progress tagline. So I'm not completely satisfied with it, but I'll work with it. And then I format it. So this is, I have it saved as heading 2 in mine. And what that does is it lets me see off to the side what my different taglines are. So when I'm reading a doc and I need to just skip around really quickly, I'm able to see it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the article and I want to cite it. So normally I would go into like EasyBib or something and I would cite it, or I would have a site creator. I don't want to go through all that right now, so I'm just going to show you really fast. So her name is Senior, and she wrote this recently. So I'm going to put the date, and I will format it again to say this. So now I'm able to see who it came from, and then the rest of the citation would be here. And this stuff is not something you're going to read, so I put it as a subtitle. Google Docs is more annoying than using Word, but there. So now I'm able to see both who said it, the date it was published, and also if someone wanted to follow the LinkedIn round, I'm able to see that too. Now, what you would do is you're going to go through the entire article and you're going to start underlining things that look important. So you would go here, let's read the article really fast. Like maybe you want to talk about the health crisis, economic crisis, social crisis, right? Because that sounds like something that's going to be important to talk about. So voters doubled down, Lee is winning on election day, things like this. So you're going through and you're kind of highlighting what you think is important. Maybe there are stats in it or other things that would say, that tell you exactly why it's important. And you keep going through the article and going through it. And so let's just assume that I've highlighted all the warrants. I obviously have not read this article in depth enough to know what all the warrants are. Then I'm going to start looking. So do I want to say Trump is flailing like an overturned turtle? The overturned turtle sounds like a little bit too much. So I'm going to highlight just specific phrases. And then talking about all the crises sound important. So I'm going to highlight the crisis. Then I don't think knowing that Lee is winning on election day is as important. The Trump support is sliding down with white women sounds important because that's the reason why he's going to lose the 2020 election. And so I keep going through this, and then ultimately I have a card that I want to read. Now, this isn't a condensed format at all. So what you would do is then go through and everything that you didn't use, you would make into 8-size font. And you start condensing it all like this and removing enters so that there's no paragraphs. And this really condenses it all so that you're not stuck scrolling while you're trying to read. And so you go through this, and then ultimately you would have a pretty card that looks like this one. Are there any questions? That was a lot that I just went through. And it's definitely a process to learn how to cut cards.
Someone had a question about not like how to format the text. They said that they didn't see it.
Okay, yeah, so I already have it saved for me in my headings. But what you can do is when you have something in Google Docs, do you see the styles over here, right? So the normal text, and then I can change this into a title if I wanted to. I can make it a heading. I can do heading 2 and keep going. So I just have that as normal text. But for example, this tagline that I was going to use, I made that heading 2 so that I can see it over here. And my heading 1 might be the title of the argument. So, like, you haven't learned what a disad is, but you will eventually. And so I would title it the disad and then going into the specific card that I'm using. Does that make sense? Okay, are there any other questions on how to cut cards?
Not a question, but just a thing to like mention to them is like going into incognito mode to access articles.
Yeah. So a lot of news organizations won't let you get access to their articles. Like you're limited to 5 articles per week or something. And when you're trying to just cut a ton of articles, it's annoying to always be limited, or you have to create an account. So a great way to get past that is to use incognito mode. On PCs, you just do Control Shift N. But if you're just in Google, you can go to the sidebar and click New Incognito Window. And this is basically a window that can't be tracked. Your passwords and everything won't be saved on here either. And so when you're going to like the New York Times, you click on it, and oftentimes this will remove the article limit that is placed on you. Okay, any other questions? No? Do you all want to walk through another example? I can find a shorter article that we can cut.
Do you want to try doing it in Word?
Yeah, I can also show you all how to do it in Word because I think it's way more convenient. But it also requires using an app that was designed specifically for debate called Verbatim. So let me show you what like full file might look like. These aren't full files.
I have some pulled up if you want me to show them.
Yeah, I just got Abby Alice's app from last year, so there we go. Hello. Actually, yeah, Ishan, can you show it because it's not opening?
Sure. One sec. Let me just. Oh, this is weird. Okay. Yeah. There we go. I think I got it.
Okay.
Let's see. Hmm.
Oh, here, mine actually just opened. So if you can stop your screen share, I can open mine.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, so let's show you this. So this is like a full file. This is something that we developed over the course of a year. So as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff in bold. This is, again, our taglines. So for this card, we have our tag here. So Taiwan's importance is uniquely rising now. Our citation, so this was written by someone with the last name of K on 6/11/2019. And then over here is our citation. So we're able to tell who K is over here, what the title of the article was initially, who published the article, and then also the link for the article. So if someone wants to fact check you and round, make sure you're not skewing what someone said, they can go and look at the full article. So the way we use verbatim is I'll show you how to use the different functions on this card specifically. So if I created a new doc, my computer doesn't crash. So the way you create a tagline. So we can see here that I have this extension in Word that lets me do different things. So I can make this a block, or I can make it a tag, I can make it a pocket, and these things are basically different levels of organization that you would have um, in your file to just make it easier to move around and see it in the navigation bar because you are able to click on the different things. So I can make this a tagline and it automatically formats it. Then
Um,
now yeah,
it's I don't know if it's just my laptop, but it still shows the like full master doc or full master file and not.
interesting. Okay, I'll just mess around with it on the master file then. Okay, so over here, this is the tag, so I can make it into a block, change the way it's formatted. So it changes the way you see it in the navigation bar and makes it easier to navigate. So this is just a tagline. So I'm going to click the tag bar, or I can use F7 on my computer, on my keyboard, and that'll also make it into a tag. Then we have this case 611, that's the citation. But if I wanted to make it the citation to begin with, I click F8 and it automatically loads this formatting so that it looks just like the tagline. And that way I know I'm going to read Taiwan's importance is uniquely rising now as U.S.-China relations deteriorate. That's Tay in 611. And then the rest of the citation, we just make it small because we're like, we don't want to read it. It's just there so that people are able to fact check you, make sure you're not skewing anything, that you're using real evidence, etc. The reason why verbatim specifically is great is because it's easy to highlight. So you can click on this highlight here, and then you just drag and you're able to highlight things, which is not something that exists in Google Docs, unfortunately. And it has other functions too. So if I wanted to condense this, because it's a really big chunk of text, I would just click this F3 here. Not that one. Here. Okay, that's not doing, my verbatim sometimes messes up, but it's supposed to put them all together. And then I can also shrink things. So like this is a huge block of text. If I wanted to just shrink everything that wasn't highlighted, I would click that. Does that make sense? If you wanted to download verbatim, if you have Word, you can just look it up. It'll probably pop up verbatim debate. Yeah, so it's this paperless debate one. You can download it for both Word and for iOS, two different versions. I would encourage you all to download it if you can, because it's definitely a lot easier than cutting cards in Google Doc, and it makes it a lot faster to cut cards like this. Any questions?
So I got a question that
Yeah.
was, do we submit our cards to the judges during rounds? And the answer to that is yes. You not only do you send your cards to your judge, but you also send your card to your opponents. That way your opponents can follow along what you're saying and make sure you're not making stuff up. And they'll also send their cards to you respectively. And that's prior to each speech.
Yeah, so you typically form an email chain at the beginning of the round. Judges choose whether or not to be on the email chain. Some prefer not to be on it, and will ask for cards specifically at the end, and some will just want to be it right off the bat. And so they'll all give you your emails, and then you're just sending all of your evidence back and forth. It streamlines the process, but this is only true for LD and policy debate. If you're doing PF, it's a little different. The way cards look is also a little different. But for the purpose of the tournament this weekend, but not this week, next weekend, and the way it'll be formatted there, you will have an email chain where you will be required to send all your evidence. The judges will be on the email chain, and we want to see your evidence formatted in cards like the ones you just saw.
Also, even in events where you are not using like cards, so that would be parley and basically only parley and some speech events. know that judges are absolutely checking you while you're speaking. Most judges nowadays will judge on their laptops or judge on their iPads or something like that. And that means that every time you get up and speak and you say something, the judge knows is like kind of weird, kind of off. It means that they're looking it up. And if you like, a couple like minor mistakes are okay, but a lot of them destroys your integrity when you're speaking. So even if you're not using like this formatting of cards in whatever debate you end up going into, know that you need to do pretty intensive research like in and out of round, because you will be like held accountable for what you say, basically.
Yeah, and if you
Yeah.
can see Zara's file here, and now it has like a lot of words, and we have like honestly the evidence docs, they just like take so much, like space because they're really, really big, and that's because you always have to be prepared for every single argument, and that too with evidence. And so that's why having evidence is really important, and doing good evidence analysis on why your evidence is better than your opponent's is also really important.
Yeah, sometimes your rounds will honestly just come down to your evidence quality. If you have better evidence, if you have more evidence than the other team, like there's only so much a team can do if they do not have the evidence to back up their claims or to respond to claims that your own authors make, which is why debate is such a research intensive process and why learning how to do research is so important.